File size, an aspect of gaming that is rarely taken into consideration. You rarely hear someone complain that the newest popular FPS game requires 200 gig to download. Nor does anyone praise a complex, multi-layered single-player game with outstanding graphics just takes 30 gig to install. Maybe it's because everyone has 1 terabyte or more storage space in their HD disks and SSDs. However, if you're someone who wants to have all Assassin's Creed games plus a few other games installed on your PC, you will need more than 800 gig of storage. And I, unfortunately, am someone who wants to have all AC games installed. Well, maybe not all. So anyway, I decided to rank all Assassin's Creed games based on their file size. Now ranking them is a bit tricky. Obviously, ranking them from highest to lowest would be a super obvious list. So instead, I will rank them based on a scenario where my storage space is only +1 of their installation size. So for example, if one of the games requires 50 gig, then in the scenario I only have 51 gig in my storage space. So I'll rank that specific game based on how likely I am to willingly install it despite ending up with basically no additional space, which not only prevents me from downloading additional stuff, but will likely impact my system's overall performance. Also, please note that these are all file sizes for PC. I only play games on PC since that's the only system I have, so that's really all I can refer to. Anyway, let's begin. In the last place is Assassin's Creed Shadows with a whopping 167.5 gigabytes. That size also includes the clause of a WAGI DLC. Now, fun fact, this is the biggest file size in this list. Yes, Shadows' file size is bigger than Valhalla, and that is just with one DLC. Imagine if they add a couple more. Anyway, Shadows is in the last place simply because I believe it is an absurd amount of storage space for the game you are getting. Now obviously, storage space is heavily impacted by the game's graphics, and Shadows is a pretty game. However, after hearing about how Helldivers 2 reduced their 150GB file size to around 23 gig, I realized that Shadows might have a lot of room for optimization, especially when it is already exceeding Valhalla's file size with all the DLC. Furthermore, Shadow's overall quality just doesn't feel worth that 167.5 gig. I know it has a weather system, 2 characters that you can control and other stuff, but with the horrible cutscenes and very repetitive gameplay, I don't see myself sacrificing my last bit of storage space for a game like that. If they can reduce it to like 50 or even 60 gig, then maybe. But for 167 gig, it's a no for me. In 13th place is Syndicate with 65.2 gigabytes. Now 65 gig is actually not bad for this game. It's pretty average and it's not too heavy. However, in a scenario where I only have 66 gig of storage, I don't see myself giving it to Syndicate, mainly because there are other games in the list that I think are more deserving of it. It's really just because I see Syndicate as that forgettable Assassin's Creed game and an inferior version of Unity. And so if I have limited storage space, I would likely be installing Unity instead of Syndicate. Still, Syndicate has some good and great parts. I love the Jack the Ripper DLC. But overall, there are just better games with better quality to file size ratio. In 12th place is Mirage with 63 gigabytes. Similar to Syndicate, Mirage is here simply because the other options are better. Mirage is just a good game and honestly, it being 63 gig feels too much for the game's size. I feel like Unity is bigger than Mirage, the world is more condensed and has more verticality too, and it's like more than 10 gig lower. So Mirage really should have been like 50 to 55 gig. But yeah, I like Mirage for what it tried to accomplish. It could have been a much better game quality-wise. And so the quality to size ratio just deserves 12th place for me. In 11th place is Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered with 47.74 GB. Though I have to note that the remastered version includes Liberation, which might be more or less 4 GB. Anyway, again, sorry for sounding like a broken record, but the reason for this placement is similar to Syndicate and Mirage. The other options are just better. 47.74 GB for a graphically upgraded AC3 is big compared to the original size of like 18 GB or something. That's more than twice the OG size. And the fact that the original version doesn't exist anymore, and so we only have the remastered version as an option. I feel like if they really wanted to, they could probably do the graphics update and keep it at like 25 GB or something. I don't know if that's possible, but again, referencing Helldivers 2's reduction from 150 GB to 23 GB, I think it should be doable. Still, AC3 is a good AC game. We get to play as Haytham and explore the Assassin vs Templar philosophy, which are things that can potentially persuade me to install a 47 GB game even if I only have 49 GB left. Next is Valhalla with the 160.9 GB storage requirement, the second biggest file size in the list. The reason Valhalla somehow got it to the top 10 is mainly my personal preference. I can see some people putting this game in last place. But for me, as a sucker for anything Viking and medieval, Valhalla is just a worthwhile game. For 160.9, I get to have a Viking simulator, a beautiful open world, a decent story, a lot of side missions, and cool gameplay. The only reason why I'm not putting Valhalla higher is mainly because I recently am having a hard time replaying it. Not because I'm bored or anything, but just because I don't want to part with the weapons I already collected in my main save. I really think that a new Game Plus would benefit Valhalla greatly, and I'm even willing to accept the game becoming 170 GB for it. Though again, Helldivers on a 3 GB update. So I expect that they should be able to reduce the file size to maybe 100 or even less. In 9th place is Odyssey with 108.31 GB. Now I think Odyssey's file size is somewhat justified from both gameplay and world building perspective. You control a ship, explore a large world, you have a lot of side quests with full stories, and there's the mercenary mechanic which is somewhat reminiscent of the Nemesis system. So while Odyssey is not a very good Assassin's Creed game, it has a lot of content that can keep you busy. However, since I'm ranking the file sizes in relation to quality as other AC games, Odyssey can really just sit at 9th place. The 108.31 GB is for a game that uses the Assassin's Creed title, but at its core is a completely different experience. Still, if you dig deep and do some mental gymnastics, you can gaslight yourself into thinking Odyssey is a decent AC game. And that was exactly what I did, which is also why it's in the 9th place. Though maybe if Odyssey was like 50 GB, it would have reached top 5. Next is Origins in 8th place with 70.92 GB. Origins, while the first AC game to follow a road less traveled, it still felt like an AC game. I mean, its story was literally how the Hidden Ones started. For that 70.92 GB, you get great stories, phenomenal voice acting, a gameplay that feels good though a bit alien for a stealth AC fan, and a beautiful ancient Egypt to explore. However, similar to my take on Shadows, Origins gameplay can feel repetitive once you hit the 30 to 40 hour mark. The skills you get doesn't really change the gameplay much, nor do other customization elements feel significant. They're all too combat focused, which leaves a lot to be desired for stealth. Still, 70.92 gig, which is just about 5 gigabytes higher than Syndicate and 8 gigabytes higher than Mirage, feels like a good deal for what Origins can offer. Though it also speaks to how those two latter games could have had much smaller file sizes. In 7th place is Brotherhood with 9.34 gigabytes, the first entry with a file size less than 10 gig. Now, Brotherhood is a pretty small game, so I do expect it to have a lower file size. The story is shorter and the map is a bit smaller as well than AC2, but the graphics and mechanics have been improved. For comparison, its file size is just about 2 gigabytes bigger than AC2. The quality to file size ratio is pretty nice since the game's story and gameplay are great. Though if we go back to the 2010s, I can see that a 9.34 gig game might be considered big. Still, the main reason it's not higher is that the other ones in the list here have just offered much more in relation to their file size. In 6th place is Rogue with just 11.96 gigabytes. Rogue is a great game but a short one. I think the game's quality gives justice to its file size. Being a Templar instead of an assassin is a pretty cool idea. It also has a large open world where you can sail on Shay's ship, the Morrigan, and do various activities. However, because Freedom Cry, a similar game to Rogue but a spin-off, has a much smaller file size of 9 gig, I think it might be possible for Rogue to have gone with 10 gig or lower. In 5th place is Assassin's Creed 1 with 6.73 gigabytes. Now, to be honest, I feel like 6.73 is actually pretty big for AC1. As much as I love it, the gameplay becomes redundant fast. The cities, while there are some distinctions, look and feel identical. Most NPCs are just copy-paste of one another, which is fine given the era that the game was released. But them more often than not being beside each other gives the impression that there is a small pool of assets that the game is pulling from. Still, as I mentioned, given the time that AC1 was released, the things I've said are excusable. However, if they really wanted to, I do feel like they could have made the game a bit smaller, though I might be wrong. In 4th place is Unity with 49.58 gigabytes. Unity is a pretty big game in terms of almost everything. The open world is big, dense, and has a lot of verticality. There's a lot of small details from NPC behaviors and animations to interesting environmental storytelling. There are also large crowds in the cities with different NPC types and behaviors, which amps up system performance and probably file size as well. There are investigations, side missions, and other activities to keep the player busy and fill the world with content. I just feel like there are a lot of assets used in Unity, along with various systems, and so it being just 49.58 gig, when Syndicate and Mirage are more than 60, increases the quality to file size ratio. Honestly, I could have put Unity higher, but the other options are just better. In 3rd place is Revelations with 7.77 gigabytes. Similar to Brotherhood, Revelations is smaller in every scale than AC2. It is also shorter than Brotherhood if I remember correctly. But where Revelations shine are the updated systems including the Hook Blade, bomb crafting system, and the Hideout Defense minigame. The Hook Blade introduced a bunch of mechanics from riding on zip lines to various combat moves. The bomb crafting is a functional mechanic that allows for a lot of customization, from creating throwable smoke bombs to stink bombs that can stick to enemies. Then there is the Hideout Defense minigame, which is basically another game packed within Revelations. And all these were compacted in a 7.77 gig game, smaller than Brotherhood and Rogue. If Revelations' story was just longer or a bit more cinematic, it might have gotten 2nd place. In 2nd place is Assassin's Creed 2 with 6.90 gig. AC2 improved upon everything Assassin's Creed 1 did and gave us a more cinematic story experience. We saw Ezio from birth to becoming a man and an assassin in this one game. It introduced a lot of memorable scenes in the series as well as a world that feels alive. Exploring Florence and the other cities felt like the NPCs are actually living due to the sound design along with the moving crowds. Speaking of moving crowds, it's kinda insane at the time how Ezio can simply join a random group of NPCs and become invisible to his enemies. Add the other tidbits in the world plus the improved combat and overall gameplay design, and the game has so much content and enhancement despite it being just 2 MB bigger than the first game. And honestly, making this ranking and looking at AC2 led me to have more appreciation of the game. AC2 doubled down on what AC1 tried to achieve and did it while not bloating the file size too much. In first place is Black Flag with 29.37GB. I mean, what can I say? For less than 30GB, you get the best pirate game, a story that shows the dangers of freedom and how the creed plays a role, and sea shanties. Black Flag is just a complete package in a sense that it's a very fun game with an amazing story. The ship combat along with other naval activities is a game in itself. The story is just phenomenal, a lot of the cutscenes are great and there is a sort of theatrics in its presentation. Then there's the world that is filled with more activities yet also looks great. And the best part, there is nothing more soothing than just sailing the seas and listening to the crew sing the sea shanties you have collected throughout Edward's journey. And all these are just for 29.37GB worth of storage. So if ever I only have 31GB left, I would not hesitate to allot 99% of that to Black Flag just for me to experience the story time and time again, and listen to the songs of the sea during moments of peace.